Hello everyone, this is episode 6 of Play Like a WoT Pro, and today I'm going to share with you the top 3 skills for random battles according to some of the best players on the NA server. In total I surveyed 14 players and all of them were in the range of 4k to 6k recent win rate, so these are the best of the best. Some of them are even players who can do up to 5,000 or even over 5,000 damage in many tier 10s in random battles. I asked them what are the 3 most important skills to know to do well in random battles. Now, before I give you the top 3 skills that they responded with, I'll have to explain how I ranked the responses. It was hard to rank and categorize them because the responses were surprisingly varied and some responses had overlap. For example, one player responded that general game knowledge was one of their top 3 skills, but another person responded that knowing enemy reloads was one of their top 3 tips. And so these two tips are not the same, but knowing enemy reloads is kind of an example of game knowledge. So I had to figure out how to sort those. So what I did to fix that problem was I sorted all the different responses into general themes of tips, and from that I found the 3 most frequently suggested themes from the responses. I ranked the skills in order of the number of times that they were mentioned by the respondents. And by the way, if you aren't satisfied with like just knowing the skills, then I will be doing a separate video on each of the 3 skills where I give specific and concrete examples of how I'm using each of those 3 skills. The replay I picked for this video isn't going to really show off any of these 3 skills. I couldn't find a replay that showed off all 3 of the skills very well, so I just decided to pick an entertaining replay. So anyways, let's get to the first skill. The first skill to do well in random battles is situational awareness. This skill was voted on by 11 people, or it was mentioned in their responses. And so situational awareness or map awareness is the most important. Some of the things people included about this skill were knowing when to run or rotate based on what is spotted, knowing when to begin redlining when it's clear that you're losing, and when to push your team with your team if you have an overmatch on a flank. So basically the main idea behind this skill is that you need to know when to adapt your positioning and your level of aggression based on the situation you find yourself in. The second most popular skill included in the responses, with 6 people including this in their responses, was positioning, especially initial positioning. Initial and mid-game positioning is easily some of the most useful knowledge that you can learn, especially if you're kind of not an extremely experienced player. Especially if you're a newer player, learning initial positions is extremely helpful. The position you go to depends on what tank you're in and your matchmaking, but on most maps there are generally 1 or 2 places you can go at the start of the battle to get free damage. So for example, on Glacier you can go to the middle of the map and often shoot tanks who are crossing onto the place where the heavy tanks play. Also, for example, on mines you can go up to the base of the hill and shoot people going up. Those are just a few examples. I'll be doing a whole video, or probably multiple or even many videos on initial positions on all the different maps that you can use, but those are just a few examples. And another thing to note is that positioning somewhat ties into situational awareness, the first skill, because some positions are only viable if you have your team support, or they're only viable in very unique situations. So for example, in this Tundra game, I was only able to take the hill because my team was pushing with me. Otherwise, this position would be really bad. Like if, for example, the enemy team had a CS-63 and he went up the hill right away, I would just be trading with another tank and it wouldn't be optimal. But because they supported me, I was able to use this position. So that's kind of an example of both situational awareness, the awareness of knowing my team is helping me, and of positioning. The hill on Tundra, if you can get it, is very strong. The third place for the most important skill was a tie between patience and surviving, and between game knowledge and knowledge of game mechanics. Each of them got 5 mentions in the different responses I received. However, patience and surviving late into the game was ranked higher in several players' responses than game knowledge was, so I decided it should be placed higher than game knowledge and in knowledge of game mechanics. In Dodo's own words, you can't do damage or influence a game if you are dead. That's kind of the essence of what surviving means. A good tip is to look at your survival rating in all of your tanks. And if, for example, you have a 60% win ratio in the tank, and you're getting, let's say, 30% survival rating, you need to work on surviving more often. So take a look at your survival ratings. Make sure that your survival rating is at least 2/3 of what your win rate is. So if you're only surviving to 20% of your battles, then you're really playing too aggressive and you need to work on that. Just in general, it's a good idea to save as much HP as you can into the late game, unless the game is a steamroll, in which case you might need to trade hit points to get out damage before you win or lose. And I'll be making videos about this, basically knowing when to trade your HP in a random battle and when to save it. I wouldn't feel comfortable completing the video unless I gave an honorary mention to the rest of the skills that the respondents stated, as they still are important. The rest were in order of priority, in order of number of responses saying this skill. We have game mechanics and knowledge, including things like how to angle correctly, view range, weak spots, and map knowledge, including angles. Next one is knowing enemy reloads and knowing how to trade effectively, even in paper tanks, which I guess you saw a little bit of this game. Next, making your shots count. Basically, I kind of think that this one should be higher on the list. I'm kind of surprised it wasn't. But I see a lot of players just throw away their shots when if they just took a little bit longer to aim, or if they just didn't take such a risky shot, then they would have ended up finding an easier shot in just a few seconds even. So definitely work on that one if you find yourself shooting very risky shots quite often. Next, there was using the correct loadout, crew skills, and equipment. Then we have tracking enemy tanks, a skill which I featured a little in my last video. Then we have pre-aiming in the right location. And then surprisingly, the last one on the list, the least mentioned skill, which was only mentioned once, was mechanical aim, which I found very interesting. That this was at the bottom of the list, and the reason I think it's at the bottom of the list is because aim is hard to improve relative to these other skills. There's no doubt that aim is very important in World of Tanks, as you can see as I sniped this VZ's Cupola. But this game is very knowledge heavy and strategy heavy, and so that's why I think mechanical aim is not on the top of the list. But anyways, this was more meant to be an intro video for my next few videos, or really for a lot of videos I'll be making in the future. I'll be making videos on all of these tips and skills, but especially on those top 3 skills. Situational awareness, which involves being aware of when your team is losing and when your team is winning and how to adapt in those situations. That's what I'll especially be focusing on when it comes to situational awareness. Then secondly, positioning, especially initial positioning, which I think is initial positioning is super easy to learn, but it makes such a massive difference if you didn't know about those positions before. I'll be making a lot of videos about where to go at the start of battles in different tanks and on different maps, in different matchmaking and in different game modes. Then lastly, surviving and keeping your HP until late game when you can use it more effectively to get end game damage. And also just saving HP just keeps your gun in the game, whereas if you die, that's it, your game is over. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but keeping yourself alive on a one-shot, you can get like 2,000 extra damage on a one-shot if you're just very patient. 2k or more, really. So anyways, you can expect videos on these topics very soon. I think my next video will probably be on initial positions. And in that video, I'll probably just give a bunch of examples of initial positions you can take on different maps and in different game modes. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you found the survey enlightening, and I'll see you next time.